When you hear the phrase the 1%, it's usually a term of abuse, reserved for the wealthiest Americans at the top of the pile. However, author Richard Reeves argues that it's not the 1%, but the top 20% who are the problem. That's the focus of his new book, Dream Hoarders: How the American Upper Middle Class is Leaving Everyone Else in the Dust, Why That's a Problem and What to Do About It. Richard Reeves joined me earlier. So, Richard Reeves, can you define for us exactly who it is in America that's hoarding money and opportunity for themselves and their families?
It's the top fifth, top 20% of the distribution, average income about $200,000, household annual income. That's really the group I'm talking about.
It's very interesting. And of course, the last election, we saw a lot of voters angry about globalization, about being left behind. But your book shows exactly how much American voters had to worry about.
Well, it does look as if this group at the top, the upper middle class, the dream hoarders as I call them, they are pulling away. They're pulling away economically, they're pulling away residentially, you can know where they live, they're pulling away in terms of their education, and so there is this class separation taking place in the US now, and maybe the election reflected that a bit.
You and I are both British citizens who became Americans. We're used to Americans teasing us about the British class system, but actually, isn't the American one much more stratified than ours?
Well, the facts suggest that certainly that top group perpetuate themselves across generations more so than in the UK. And I have to tell you that I didn't think I would ever miss the British class system. But at least we know we have a problem with class in Britain, whereas what's happening in the US is that there's this kind of veneer of classless meritocracy. And what that does, actually, it disguises the class system here. So it turns out the American class system is just better camouflaged than the British one.
Indeed, and you describe in the book in great detail how parents go about creating this gilded lives for their children. So what are the tricks of the trade?
Well, yeah, it's like almost a glass floor in a way to stop them being downwardly mobile. And the key things are to make sure you get a house in a good neighborhood where the schools are good or pay for schooling. Really play the college game well. The college system in the US really perpetuates inequality, and so getting your kid into a good four-year college and then helping him maybe into an internship or something that you know about on the grapevine. There are various ways this group can essentially protect their own kids against the risk of going down.
But was it ever thus, or are we seeing it becoming more entrenched?
So parents have always wanted their kids to do well and very often stop at little to kind of prevent them being downwardly mobile. But because of this big economic separation, the upper middle class now has more economic power and more political power, and they can therefore change the geography of our cities, change the way we fund higher education and so on, to suit their own ends. And so there's a kind of virtuous or vicious circle, depending on how you look at it, between economic separation and class separation.
But are there policies that can be undertaken to reverse this?
Yeah, at the smallest level, let's stop having legacy preferences in the US, whereby someone whose parents or one parent went to a college gets preferential treatment in admissions. We wiped that out in the UK in the middle of the 20th century. No one else does that. I think that the way the schools are funded based on local property taxes tends to mean you kind of build in inequality right there in the school system. The whole tax system in the US needs to be overhauled. We know that, of course. We've known that for a long time. But $70 billion a year on mortgage interest deduction and related costs, almost all of which goes to the group I'm talking about. Come on. I mean, some of this is just cheating.
It is indeed. Richard Reeves, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.